knockout. So heavy, light or middleweight, who is still in the ring? We head to the Auckland electorate of Botany to see if a former boss of Air New Zealand could land the leader's job. Aussie troops are en route to the Solomons as Honiara burns with political unrest growing. Back here, New Zealand police are told they have to get the jab or they'll be on the wrong side of the law. Another wheel falls off at Cycling New Zealand. And a yarn about Peggy squares, a shed load of them, actually a fort full. We will explain. You can watch us live on Facebook and Freeview Channel 50.
RNZ News at 5 o'clock. Kia ora, I'm Marama Tipole. A new COVID variant that's emerged in southern Africa is causing serious concern. The fear is it will be more transmissible and more deadly than Delta. World Watch's Perlina Lau reports.
Known as B11529, the variant has been described by some scientists as horrific. They say it's one of the most heavily mutated versions found so far. 59 cases have been found in South Africa and Botswana, as well as one in Hong Kong. The UK and Israel have already suspended flights to and from several southern African countries.
No cases of the variant have been detected in New Zealand, but the government says the situation is being closely monitored. The epidemiologist Michael Baker says that in any case, this country is well placed to keep new COVID variants out. He says it's among a fortunate group of countries that still use pre-departure tests, MIQ and self-isolation.
The good news for New Zealand, or the reassuring news for us, is that whatever this variant does, New Zealand is well placed to manage the threat because we know that we can keep this virus out if we have to.
The government is awaiting analysis from the World Health Organization, which is due to hold a special meeting in a few hours. The Deputy Prime Minister has defended the government's work on increasing Maori vaccination rates. It emerged today that an independent group warned the government on September the 23rd that getting the country's vaccination rate well over 90% needed to be an urgent priority. It also said the program was failing certain populations, most notably Maori, and recommended more funding to address disparities. Grant Robertson says the government did take the report on board.
We were also very aware, as we saw the way the vaccination program was rolling out, that we did need to put more resource into supporting the Maori vaccination program, and we did that.
Australian troops are expected to be landing in Honiara about now to help Solomon Islands police quell days of rioting by anti-government demonstrators. A building behind the official residence of Prime Minister Manasseh Whangarei is reported to be on fire, while in front of it a mob has been throwing rocks at officers who are retaliating with tear gas from behind shields. RNZ Pacific correspondent Elizabeth Osifelo reports.
They're still with the tear gas and the shields are up. And also there was visibility of the AFP police officers that arrived last night. They were also visible at the eastern part of Honiara area.
Elizabeth Osifelo says there are checkpoints throughout the city. It's not known where Mr Whangarei is at this time. Back home, Auckland business owners who say crime is on the rise in the inner city are crying out for help. ACT leader David Seymour says it's partly because officers are assigned to the pandemic response, including 271 to border duties in the region. The chief executive of the Newmarket Business Association, Mark Knopf-Thomas, says he raised concerns about COVID crime waves over a year ago, and things have become worse.
We're seeing bashings, we're seeing muggings, we're seeing robberies, endless robberies, and the police, our local police, are amazing. They do a fantastic job, but they're so stretched. They're being run ragged across the city. And I think what annoys me the most or frustrates me the most, and for our business owners, is that the minister appears to be asleep at the wheel.
Mark Knopf-Thomas says business owners need immediate help from the government. It's coming up to 4 minutes past 5. The Sports Minister says the breach of Olympic rules by Cycling New Zealand didn't cost the country any medals at the Tokyo Games. Cycling New Zealand's high-performance boss, Martin Barra, has resigned after an investigation found the team broke international rules when illegally replacing a cyclist in an event. Chief Executive Jacques Landry won't identify which riders were involved or the event. Grant Robertson says the breach is both disappointing and unfortunate.
It's important to note that it didn't affect any of our medals or anything like that at the Games, but still, the rules are the rules, and we expect our bodies like Cycling New Zealand to follow them.
The number of COVID-19 positive members of the Breakers travelling party has increased to 8, up from 4 earlier in the week. The Breakers are in Melbourne preparing for the ANBL basketball season. Play has started on day 2 of the second cricket test between New Zealand and India and Kanpur, with India resuming their first innings at 258 for 4. Meanwhile, fast bowler Pat Cummins has been named captain of the Australia Test team, replacing Tim Payne, who stood down after revelations he sent lewd text messages to a female former colleague 4 years ago. And the family of football great Diego Maradona has marked the first anniversary of his death by revealing one of his last wishes was for his remains to be left in a mausoleum where fans can pay homage to him. And that's the news.
Tomorrow morning, Afghan Nawroz Ali's long and harrowing journey to safety. Celebrity scientist Steven Pinker on being rational. And Joe Guy on holding things together after the death of his son Scott and the imprisonment of his son-in-law risked tearing her family apart. Paul Kinhillaho, join me tomorrow morning from 8 on RNZ National.
And now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Saturday. Northland to Waitomo, including Coromandel Peninsula and Bay of Plenty. Fine breaks and isolated showers. Taranaki to Wellington, including the central high country. Partly cloudy, isolated showers from the Kapiti Coast northwards, spreading to Wellington tomorrow evening. Gisborne to Wairarapa, also Nelson, mainly fine. A few showers in Wairarapa and Nelson tomorrow evening. Marlborough and Canterbury mainly fine today. A few spots of rain south of Ashburton and rain developing tomorrow. For Otago, high cloud, patchy rain in the east, becoming widespread tonight, then gradually clearing tomorrow. Bulla and Westland mostly cloudy. A few showers in Westland spreading to Bulla this evening and turning to rain south of the glaciers. Rain everywhere tomorrow with heavy falls. Southland and Fiordland rain with heavy falls, possible clearing for tomorrow. And for the Chatham Islands, fine today with cloudy periods and a few showers for tomorrow. RNZ National, it's coming up to 7 minutes past 5.
Nā mihi marama, tēnā koutou katoa, no mai haere mai ki Checkpoint I tēnei rā, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. Back to bridges or take off for Christopher Luxon. Phones are running hot as the National Party search for a fourth leader in under 2 years. RNZ understands former leader Simon Bridges wants his old job back, saying he's older and wiser than he was before. None of his colleagues are yet to formally mount a challenge. Judith Collins was ousted yesterday by the caucus after her attempt to exile Mr Bridges backfired spectacularly. Here's our political reporter Katie Scotcher.
Former National MPs scathing in their summary of the last 48 hours.
Well, I simply don't understand what happened yesterday. It's beyond human comprehension, really.
Yep, it's a mess that needs to be sorted. Look, it's been a real cluster, hasn't it?
The cluster caused by Judith Collins' attempt to take out potential challenger and former leader Simon Bridges. But it backfired, and now there's a vacancy. The opposition leader's job is up for grabs. When asked yesterday if he wanted his old job back, Mr Bridges gave this answer or pitch.
I'm an older, possibly wiser guy than I was certainly 5 or 6 years ago, but even a couple of years ago when I was leader of the National Party.
RNZ understands Mr Bridges is throwing his hat in the ring for the leadership, but he and the other possible contenders, Christopher Luxon, Chris Bishop and Mark Mitchell, have gone to ground.
Hi, this is Christopher Luxon. Please leave a short message.
Hi, you've reached Mark Mitchell.
Hi, Simon Bridges here. I'm unavailable at the moment. Please leave a message.
At the tone, record your message.
Former senior National MP Christopher Finlayson says while it's up to caucus to decide, Christopher Luxon and Mark Mitchell could both be valid options.
I'd like to see some of these new ones shine a little bit more, because I think they've got a real contribution to make, the sort of contribution that people out there are wanting to hear from the National Party. They are sick of psychodramas.
He says instead of running for the leadership, Mr Bridges and Judith Collins should actually consider doing something quite different.
What I hope is that a couple of the players may use the summer period to consider whether or not their future is in politics and whether they should perhaps go back to the law, and I'd be very happy to provide careers advice.
National MPs will meet at 3 o'clock on Tuesday to choose their new leader and their deputy. It's understood no rules for the meeting have been set, meaning it could go to a vote, or the caucus could agree to unanimously back a contender. Former Speaker of the House, Sir David Carter, would prefer the leadership is sorted sooner.
Whilst I agree that the firing of Judith was sudden, there's been rumours of leadership change going on now for weeks, so I would have thought caucus was in the position to have a decent discussion yesterday, unite behind one person and get on with it.
He wouldn't back any of the possible contenders, but former National Party Chief Press Secretary Janet Wilson was happy to. Her pick, Christopher Luxon.
He's viewed within the party as being a risky choice because he's untried and untested. But there is a corollary of all of that, to my mind, in that he's a fresh face and that he brings fresh ideas. And in bringing fresh ideas, he could bring the change that they have so far resisted but sorely need within that party.
ACT leader David Seymour says he's happy to work with anyone.
Seems to me at the moment I like all of them more than they like each other.
The National Caucus has the weekend to decide who they're happy to work with.
There's conflict in Christopher Luxon's electorate over whether the former Air New Zealand high flyer is up for the hardest job in politics. Some Luxon loyalists told Checkpoint they're not sure he's ready to revive a party crashing and burning in the polls. Then there's the Botany believers who say it's time their man took over the controls. Our reporter Nick Trubridge and cameraman Nick Monroe hit the streets of East Auckland.
Welcome to Botany. Welcome to Luxon land. Yes, this electorate bleeds blue, but Luxon, a high flyer in the business world, is a rookie in the political realm. And that's a worry to some.
No, I don't think he's ready. He hasn't had enough time. He was just the CEO of a government department for a long time, and he's got to have learned the ropes.
I think he'd be a good deputy. He hasn't been around long enough yet.
No, I don't think so. Not yet. Lovely man, but no.
I'm actually not sure, but it seems a wee bit soon. But then when you get into a position, it's just amazing how what is. So, yeah, I'm quite comfortable with it, I think.
Caution from some, but extreme confidence from others. You don't have to walk far in blue blood Botany to find those lusting for Luxon.
I think he'll do well because he's got 2 more years to get used to Parliament. And I would vote for him. I think it's wonderful. I like him.
No, I'd like to see him step up. Actually, I think he did a great job at Air New Zealand, so I've sort of been waiting for that move, actually, in all fairness, and I think it's probably about time, and I think he's the best option out of the lot there, so yeah.
Oh, definitely Chris Luxon. They need a new, fresh blood, someone with some brains.
But in the interests of balance, what about the other lot? Mark Mitchell, anyone?
Mitchell, yeah. Not intelligent enough. He struggles intellectually, I believe. So maybe a deputy.
OK, what about the old guard? Bring back Bridges?
Bridges, definitely not. I don't think he's already proved himself. And I don't think he would have done any better than Collins.
I think Bridges would be next, but I think he's had his chance. So I think it's time for Luxon to have a crack and see what happens though.
The two Wellingtonians, on the other hand, that's Willis and Bishop, barely rate a mention in the true blue bunker of Botany.
Oh, you know, Chris Bishop's. I don't think it'll be Christopher. Nicola Willis might be Deputy Prime Minister. Would be a good choice. You know, clean out the old guard, and because that's what essentially Labor did. But unfortunately, there's nothing behind Jacinda, and now we know there's nothing in front or behind Jacinda, so we're in trouble, aren't we?
But there is another name that keeps coming up.
Is Reti.
It'd be quite cool to have a leader, a Maori that was leader of the National Party, but I don't think there's enough personality and leadership in terms of bringing the party forward, fresh blood, new blood.
As for the blood on the floor following the past 2 days' political turmoil, the message here is clean it up quick. The Nats may be losing some appeal.
It's a shambles. Yeah.
going to struggle next time around, I think. I didn't vote for either, so in Labour or that, so I think they could be in trouble, but we'll see what happens.
No, I think ACT will be leading our next government, personally.
So, even in Luxon land, division when it comes to National's next top dog, but a warning to sort it out or face another term glued to the opposition benches.
And you can check out the video from our two Nicks. It'll be up on our web page. It is 5:15 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Kia ora rawatu mo te whakarongo mai. Haere ake nei, coming up, when the COVID traffic light goes on next week, will downtown Auckland be bumper to bumper with foot traffic? Police in the Defence Force will now have to be vaccinated or be out of a job. The government's announced they'll have to have their first dose by mid-January and be fully vaccinated by the 1st of March. Samantha G has more.
Police and Defence Force staff are the latest to be added to the government's workplace vaccination mandate. Workplace Relations and Safety Minister Michael Wood says the decision was made as the government prepares to transition to the COVID traffic light system in a week's time.
The vast majority of police and defence, it's over 98% with defence, are already vaccinated. So the extent to which these mandates affect people in those roles, it's actually a relatively small number of people that we're talking about.
He says vaccination mandates are strong, powerful tools that cut across normal employment rights, so it's important they're used carefully. More than 86% of police constabulary staff are fully vaccinated, as are more than 98% of New Zealand Defence Force uniformed personnel. The Minister says the mandate means from next year, staff won't be able to work in the community unvaccinated.
Well, we do think that vaccination gives an extra layer of protection. Police have also put a range of protocols in place and will continue to do so to make sure that they keep their staff and members of the public as safe as possible.
The Police Association supports the move, and Vice President Mike McRandle says it will ensure its members are treated as fairly as they could be within the law.
Across society, there's varying opinions and there's a lot of feeling, and we're going to do our best to support members around this decision in the coming weeks and months.
Mike McRandle says the number of police who were already vaccinated showed there was wide support for the mandate.
We will be supporting the people that have any concerns, and we help to support them as best we can. We're not the first organisation to have this happen to, and obviously 17th of January is that first key date for our New Zealand Police organisation and our members that are affected by this to make sure they're across.
Deputy Prime Minister Grant Robertson says now the mandate had been issued, it would work alongside the workforce to implement it. He is not expecting a pushback from police.
Clearly the whole point of this is that we want them to be vaccinated, and when we reach the end point of those discussions, if they aren't vaccinated, then they won't be able to undertake the duties of frontline police officers.
Those who choose not to get vaccinated will be given a 4-week paid notice period if their employment agreements are terminated.
And Top Cop Commissioner Andrew Coster explains why the police and support staff need compulsory vaccination.
We deal with a population that is less vaccinated than average, and we also are dealing with people up close and personal, and sometimes in situations where protective equipment can be displaced and so on. So a vaccination provides a much higher assurance that we can keep our people safe.
But why do they need a law to get them moving? Why don't they just get vaccinated, given what you've said?
Look, we really respect the fact that people have a lot of different views. Obviously, most of our people have chosen to be vaccinated. We now have a mandate, and everyone will have to be, but it's not for us to tell people how they should think.
Constabulary, 86.5% double dose. So in actual people terms and numbers, how many more people do you need to get vaccinated?
Yeah, so 86 double dose, 92 single dose. Part of our difficulty is that without the mandate, we can't require people to tell us, and we think our data is somewhat incomplete. When we have done deep dives with groups, we've found that the actual rate is higher than our data is telling us. So it's hard for me to put a number on that. We will know very soon once we start engaging around the mandate.
So ballpark, if that number's correct, how many more people would there be that need to get vaccinated?
Of our sort of 11,000 odd people who'd be affected, you're probably in the vicinity of 900 people, something like that.
So what reasons are you hearing for them not wanting to do it?
Oh, look, I think they're very representative of the community they police, and we know there are diverse views on this issue. For policing, a vaccination mandate is a really important part of how we protect our people and indeed the people we deal with. However, we respect the fact that there are a bunch of different views around this.
So what has been the reaction today from within your workers to the fact that they will now have to be vaccinated and fully vaccinated?
It's still early days in terms of that. I can tell you that the views I've picked up previously have reflected most of our staff wanting to work alongside people who are also vaccinated and being concerned about having unvaccinated people in the workforce. Of course, there are others who have expressed concerns about being vaccinated and want to be able to make their own decision. That's understandable, but in our line of work, we need to be vaccinated.
So what's the deal then? If you don't get your jab by January the 17th, your first one, you get 4 weeks' notice. Thanks very much. Goodbye.
We want to do this in a respectful way. Many of our people obviously are very long-serving. They're vocationally engaged with police. We will give people the time to think about their options. That could possibly include allowing them to take leave without pay while they think about whether they're going to change their position. And so, we'll do our best to keep people on board. It's not my desire to lose anyone as a result of this policy.
Yeah, but how many people realistically could you redeploy, take them off the front line or put them in a job where they have no public contact in order to, allow them not to be vaccinated? How many could you do that for?
Yeah, we do have some employee roles, non-constabulary roles that require investigative skills and so on. Not a large enough number to accommodate a large number of redeployments. And so our focus here will be about giving people the time and the information they need to hopefully come on board with the mandate.
Haven't they had the time, though? Because most of your workers would have been eligible from much earlier on. Haven't they had the time? If they wanted it, they'd have it by now, wouldn't they?
I think they're no different from the rest of the population in terms of this. Some, I believe, will choose the alternative vaccine option, which has some slightly different, different type of vaccine that may reassure some.
How many have indicated that, Commissioner, that they want to wait for the alternative?
Yeah, I certainly heard that view, but obviously in a very large workforce, it's, we can't interrogate people about this. With a mandate now, we can require people to tell us where they are at in terms of vaccination, and I think that will start to surface the true picture. How
long is it going to take you to get that accurate information?
Well, the deadline obviously has been set by the order, so we absolutely must have evidence that somebody has been vaccinated by then, otherwise they would be stood down until we can resolve the situation.
That deadline is quite a way off, right? So what's the deal with that? Is that because you can't possibly cope over the summer if you were to lose all these workers who are not vaccinated? At an estimate 900, you've said?
I wasn't obviously privy to the Minister's conversation on that, so I would have to speculate.
Did you support that date, though, Commissioner?
I personally haven't been involved in conversations on the date. Some of my people may have been. I would need to come back to you on that.
Okay, let me put it another way. If about 900 people within your workforce decide that they do not want to get vaccinated, how are you going to cope?
I have absolutely no reason to believe that will be the situation.
How many could you manage without?
We recruit about 1,000 people a year, and we have some ability to increase that. We have a wing coming through the police college every month at the moment. We do have the ability to redeploy away from some duties. It's absolutely not my desire to do that. I don't think that will be necessary, but ultimately we have to get this in place, and I'm confident that we will be able to get a very large proportion of our people over the line on that.
I imagine you've redeployed a lot over COVID, so have you really got anyone else that you can call on and redeploy?
Well, thankfully, come the 15th of December, we will be able to lift the border on Auckland. That is obviously consuming quite a bit of resource at the moment. We're quite capable of managing this across a large workforce.
So, Commissioner, just to be clear, you've brought up there the border on the 15th of December. Do you imagine then that you are cutting significantly the number of officers who are working at the border?
Certainly the border as it stands is very resource intensive. Clearly through the period of summer we will have a good number of staff deployed to checking Aucklanders in terms of either vaccination or a negative test. I can't tell you right at this stage what that number will be, but there will be obviously a number of staff tied up with that.
But it will be less than what you have at the moment?
I would expect so, but the planning's going on around that, and we will clarify that in time.
And you reckon you can still do the checks required if you're going with fewer officers at the borders?
Look, I'm not saying we are going with fewer. I expect it will be fewer. We need to work that through. The checks that we can do is obviously spot checking. We need to strike the right balance between checking as many vehicles as we can, whilst also recognising there's a very big flow of traffic in and out of Auckland at that time. And, we have to allow that traffic to flow.
And that is Commissioner Andrew Coster. It is 25 minutes past 5. Kia mau tonu mai. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. Ho mai o whakaaro, we'd love your feedback. Nō reira ane na kaupapa mo te hōtaka nei. Do you agree that the police should have to be fully vaccinated against COVID? And if some of them don't want to, can we afford to lose unvaccinated officers? Text us, please, pātui mai 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, or email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. The Prime Minister's residence has been attacked and buildings have been torched by rioters and major political unrest in the Solomon Islands. Australia has sent in police and Defence Force personnel to the capital Honiara as protesters defy lockdown orders and call on the Prime Minister to resign. There's been 2 days of violence which local police have struggled to contain. I'm now joined by RNZ Pacific correspondent Elizabeth Osefelo, who joins me now from Honiara. Elizabeth, what's it like there at the moment?
At the moment now, we are at the airport and we are waiting to have a confirmation of the arrival of the Australian Federal Defence. But on our way up, I was actually able to witness there was a fire actually burning not at the Prime Minister's residence, but it was a house right at the back of the Prime Minister's residence. So there was attempts to from people, hundreds of people gathered, and they were pushing to get to the Prime Minister's residence. But then our police officers and respond team did a really good job and managed to contain the situation and sort of push the people back. But there were also a bit of tear gas that was used, and the situation now is pretty much under control here. So coming out from the western end of Honiara, today I managed to come through to the eastern part. There's still a little bit of tension along the way. Buildings, you can see still smoke coming out from some of the buildings that were burnt from yesterday. But I think the situation was not as what it was compared to from yesterday.
Elizabeth, can you just explain to people what has sparked all of this?
This is probably, accumulation of a lot of frustration, and there were issues, and there was a petition with a lot of. There was a petition that was given to the Prime Minister a few months back, and I think the people felt that the Prime Minister wasn't listening to what the people wanted or what the people requested. So basically, I think this is just an accumulation of a lot of mixed feelings, frustration, and the climax of it happened the day after yesterday, and this is all what has happened from a lot of frustration.
Elizabeth, is it specifically about China's investment in the region and people's objections to that?
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
Is it in part about China's investment and involvement in the region and some people's objection to that?
The issue with China and the government switching diplomatic ties from Taiwan to China, that also is a part of it. It is not the main issue. It is a mixture of a lot of issues. But I can say that probably all this also plays a part. But it's not all of it, the China issue with Solomon Islands.
And has there been any word from the Prime Minister, given this attack that you've witnessed on basically the Prime Minister's compound? Has there been any word from him?
As we speak, the Prime Minister has not, or there hasn't been any statements issued or any announcements made of anything of that sort. The Prime Minister only gave his official announcement yesterday, and as of today, there has not been an official statement from the government or the Prime Minister.
What is the role going to be for the Aussie troops that you're obviously waiting for their arrival there? What role are they going to play?
Probably just their presence would, give people the confidence that restoring law and order, there will be a chance for law and order to be restored. As we've seen yesterday, there was a lot of chaos, and I think probably when the support that we are ready to receive in terms of security and law and order, I think their presence here will be welcomed by the people in Honiara, as they will also support the work of the police. We know that they are not here to solve our issues, but their arrival here and their presence and their visibility will, I hope and I can say, will play a very huge part in all this that has been going on for the past 2 days.
Thank you for joining us this evening. That is Elizabeth Osefelo, who's RNZ's Pacific correspondent, who's live in Honiara. Kia ora, e te iwi e haere aki nei e a checkpoint. Auckland's COVID traffic light switches on next week, but will it drive people back into the CBD? Locking and loading your vaccine pass for some, well, it's complicated, and Timaru's close to stitching up an epic knitting record. Homai o whakaaro, we'd love your feedback on anything you've heard on the program this evening. Text us on 2101. You can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ or flick us an email. The address is checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. It is time for the headlines now. Ko marama anō tēnei.
Hey, take mata. Thank you, Lisa. Police Commissioner Andrew Costa says there's broad support among police for making vaccinations mandatory. The government today said police and the Defence Force will have to have at least their first dose by mid-January and be fully vaccinated by the 1st of March. Andrew Costa told Checkpoint there were diverse issues around vaccination, but most staff support the move. Around 86% of police are double vaccinated, 92% have had their first dose. Tensions are still high in the Solomon Islands, with anti-government protesters confronting police outside the Prime Minister's residence. The protests against Manasseh Songavare's government broke out earlier this week and has led to 2 days of rioting. RNZ Pacific correspondent Elizabeth Osefelo has told the program there were still fires burning around the city, but things seem to be under control. An infectious disease expert says New Zealand must be ready to reinstate tighter restrictions if a more dangerous variant of COVID-19 from Southern Africa appears in the country. No cases have been detected yet, but the government says the situation is being closely monitored. Otago University's Michael Baker says New Zealand can completely close its borders if it needs to, but it would be unwise to take any option off the table. And the emergence of the new variant is spooking financial markets around the region. The local share market's benchmark top 50 index at one stage was down more than 1.6%. It trimmed the losses late in the day, but still closed down 1.3%, the biggest one-day fall since late March. And an Auckland business leader says he warned the government about the potential of a COVID-induced crime wave last year. The chief executive of the Newmarket Business Association, Mark Knopf-Thomas, says there's been a rise in burglaries, robberies and bashings and muggings in Auckland, and small business owners are crying out for help. Those are the headlines. Our next news update is at 6.
Thanks, Marama. Kia ora anō. This is Checkpoint. Ko Lisa Owen tēnei. Ko taku hoa inainei ko Nona Peltier, who's here to talk business. Nona, consumers are becoming more pessimistic about the economic outlook, and what does the latest survey tell us about that?
Yeah, that's the ANZ Roy Morgan Consumer Confidence for October. Well, it fell, and rather I should say eased by a point to 97. Anything under 100 is pretty much pessimistic, and partly it's rising inflation and those higher interest rates. Those are weighing on consumers' appetite to spend. Certainly, a net 6% of respondents thought it was a bad time to buy a major household item. Now, that's a key indicator of consumer sentiment. And not only that, they're more concerned about inflation, although it eased a little bit from last month to 5.7%, but that is still the second highest reading in the survey's history. And a lot of other people, the proportion who thought they might be better off financially, that eased 5 points as well to a net 15%. And so overall, it's not a really great reading. It certainly shows that people are closing their wallet for a while.
And Nona, investors are apparently going off residential property, and they're a bit confused about ongoing tax changes. What's confusing them?
Well, look, the Chartered Accountants of Australia and New Zealand, as well as the Tax Management New Zealand, did a survey of 361 accountants. So this is not investors, but they're accountants. And the accountants thought that, 21% thought, or 1 in 5 basically, felt they weren't at all confident about advising clients on the proposed new build interest limitation rules. Over 65% of the participants felt the phase-out and denial of interest deductions would be somewhat or extremely difficult to comply with. And about a half of them were either somewhat confused or not at all confident to advise clients on the new build bright line test. So it looks like this... I guess the idea is that we are supposed to be putting in place accounting practices that are easy to comply with, but we seem to be going in an opposite direction. According to the Chartered Accountants Australia and New Zealand, they'll be giving an oral presentation to the Finance and Expenditure Committee on Monday, letting them know just what they think of these regulations coming in.
No, should we take a womble around the markets?
Let's do that. Now, look, I have to tell you that we are down quite a lot, in line with what we saw in Asia. It's the sharpest drop in months overall in Asia, and that's partly, actually, it's primarily because of this possibly vaccine-resistant coronavirus variant that is making people very concerned, and they're moving their shares, moving out of shares and into bonds, the yen, the dollar, what you name it, and we have seen that in our market today. We had the worst session since late March. At one point, we were down 1.6%, but we ended up down 1.3%. That's a 166-point fall to 12,629. The New Zealand dollar is also showing the wear from this at 68.2 US cents, 95.6 Australian, and 51.3.
Ngā mihi Nona Peltier there with business. Auckland CBD could be a ghost town long after the traffic lights switch on. Large firms and companies based in the CBD aren't expecting many workers will come back to their desks just yet. That means there's still no lifeline for hospitality. Instead, they'll be facing a dire summer before the CBD begins to come back to life.
It's a week until the traffic lights turn on and Tāmaki Makaurau reaches the long-awaited red alert system. While working from home is encouraged, offices have the chance to become full again, and after more than 100 days, the city centre is hoping for the hustle and bustle of corporate life to return. But it's not looking hopeful. Simon O'Connor's the managing director at EY accounting firm based in Britomart. He's expecting only about 20% of the 750 staff based in the city to return this year.
I think given the length of this lockdown, and the proximity to Christmas, the fact that there's perhaps a little bit more nervousness out there, I suspect it'll be lower. I'd be somewhat surprised if we got over 100 in the first week or so.
He thinks working from home will become the new normal for many.
We've definitely seen a pick-up of people, working out that actually they can be really productive from home as well. So I think there will be a number of people that will increase the amount of time they're working from home as well. And that would be consistent with what we've seen in those prior lockdowns when people have come back in.
They're conscious of supporting hospitality locals with a week worth of Christmas lunches planned in the next few weeks. But with the rate of workers coming back at more of a trickle, it's not going to change anything for hospitality, despite the chance to have customers dine in again. Business will be tough for Yael Shohart at Ema Cuisine on Fort Street.
Our bread and butter are the office workers in the daytime, in the week, Monday to Friday. And obviously they're not here now, and we know that they're not coming back. I think the reality is that no one's going to be back till schools are back in the beginning of February.
It's far from the festive season she imagined.
It's not going to happen this year. We've lost Christmas. We've lost the run-up to Christmas. And I don't know what January is going to be like. Some people are saying that they'll open for January, but I think Aucklanders will leave Auckland. I mean, why wouldn't you?
Yael says if we want to get people back into the CBD, parking is a good place to start.
Aucklanders don't like to come to the CBD mainly because of parking. If they made the parking free, people will come to the CBD. I think more than vouchers, parking.
At Mian Britomart, they've reduced their hours to half days. With their regulars not popping in for a coffee before work, the mornings aren't worth it. Manager Angelina Luteru is missing the usual rush.
I really miss my regular customers coming in, sitting down, enjoy like a cake, coffee, ice cream. I miss that. I miss chatting with them. I mean, I still chat with them, but not for long, because in here it's only like 2 bubbles at a time. So sometimes I have a line out there and I have to rush them out so we can bring other people in, and it's kind of sad.
And that rush might take a while to return. Economist for Jardine John Curran says overseas examples don't indicate a rosy picture for city centres returning to normal.
Looking at the mobility statistics from Google, even those countries and states in the United States that have substantially relaxed their restrictions, the amount of people going back to the offices is still considerably less than it was pre-pandemic.
And some of that change could be long-term.
Hastened a trend that may have started anyway, where people do prefer a mix of going into the office and working from home. So I think some of that might be permanent even after the pandemic has faded.
Many of the businesses' RNZ approach for this story are still working out their return to work plans, including Auckland Council, who say the majority of staff will work from home under the red setting. However, they acknowledge the importance of getting staff back working in the city centre, as well as town centres across the region. Meanwhile, the nearby businesses that rely on those office workers cling on for dear life.
And if you were listening to that piece from Louise Tanuth and Marika Harbazi, the video will be on our website. Do check it out. Another day, another high-profile resignation at Cycling New Zealand. The organisation's high-performance director has handed in his notice after revelations there was a breach of athlete selection rules at this year's Tokyo Olympics. It's the second departure from Cycling New Zealand this week, following the chief executive on Monday. Well, joining me now to discuss all of this is sports reporter Clay Wilson. Clay, where do we start? What do we know about what's happened here?
Kia ora, Lisa. Yeah, well, the simplest way to describe this is that there's been a breach of rules relating to replacing an athlete in a specific cycling event, and that's led to the resignation of Martin Barra. Now, Cycling New Zealand and the New Zealand Olympic Committee are not saying who the athletes were or what specifically happened, but what we can say is that there are rules in place that once athletes are entered into an event, they can only be replaced due to injury or illness. So in this specific instance, the New Zealand team has made a late replacement on the basis of an injury, but the process involving the athlete who was replaced hasn't been followed correctly by Cycling New Zealand officials. So this incident has happened, the team has returned to New Zealand, and then shortly after that return, Cycling New Zealand CEO Jacques Landry was made aware of the situation. That led to this NZOC investigation, and while the findings aren't being publicly released, what we do know is that there is a breach of Olympic and UCI rules, and the UCI being the international governing body for cycling, as well as a breach of IOC and NZOC codes of conduct. So from there's been a, quote, discussion between Jacques Landry and Martin Barra, which has led to Martin Barra tendering his resignation. So Cycling New Zealand aren't talking today about this, but we did hear from Deputy Prime Minister and Sports Minister Grant Robertson, and the Minister noted the incident wasn't connected to either of the 2 track cycling medals that New Zealand won in Tokyo, but says rules are rules and they expect bodies like Cycling New Zealand to follow them. I also had the chance to speak to New Zealand Olympic Committee boss Karen Smith, who had this to say about this breach of rules.
Whether it was cycling or any sport, in a New Zealand team environment in an Olympic stage is deeply disappointing. To my knowledge, unprecedented. So, it certainly has a reflection on reputation of our country, of our team. So, it's a very serious matter.
Clay, just before we move on, is it clear whether this is a genuine mistake or whether it was a deception?
No, that's not clear. We don't have enough details around that in terms of what's being publicly revealed. It sounds like there's been a decision made by Cycling New Zealand. Whether that's a deliberate deception to break the rules or not, we don't know. We simply know that a decision's been made and it's since been adjudged to be a breach of the rules, and this is what has followed.
OK, well, this situation is just the latest in a string of high-performance issues for Cycling New Zealand. What is going on in this organisation? Yeah,
it really hasn't been a great 3 or 4 years for Cycling New Zealand. We have to go back to 2018 when the issues around the high-performance culture there were first really revealed. Now, that led to the first of these independent investigations, which found instances of bullying, an inappropriate coach-athlete relationship, and an all-round lack of accountability. That investigation also saw the exit of leading coach Anthony Peden, and then CEO Andrew Matheson also resigned. Now, he was replaced by Jacques Landry, and Jacques Landry has been charged with, implementing all the recommendations that came from that 2018 report. But it obviously appears with what's still going on that some of these issues around high performance still remain at Cycling New Zealand. Of course, we go back to August this year and we had the awful news of former Olympian Olivia Podmore and her passing, and that sparked another investigation which is still ongoing. And to round it all off, earlier this week, the latest news around Jacques Landry is that he's resigning as well. So just days before Martin Barra, we've heard Jacques Landry confirming that he's going to go. So I guess not only significant holes to fill at Cycling New Zealand in terms of important roles, but still it seems a ways to go in terms of sorting out that high-performance environment and how it functions.
Thanks, Clay. That's Clay Wilson, our sports reporter there. It is about 14 minutes to 6. I'm Lisa Owen and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Hei Muriaki ina pitipita kōrero. After the news at 6, fears a new COVID variant could be deadlier than Delta and vaccine resistant. Anyone making the trip to Northland this summer is being warned they'll likely be sent home if they get COVID, as the region's resources will be stretched to the limit. Te Tai Tukuro's bracing for up to 50,000 visitors over the next few months, but the region's health boss is asking anyone who is unvaccinated to stay away. Nita Blake-Person reports.
Northland's COVID cases have been steadily rising in recent weeks. There was one new case in Te Tai Tokoro today, a child. There are now 26 active cases in the region, and Northland DHB Chief Executive Nick Chamberlain says health teams are getting some practice in managing COVID.
In the next month or so, we will be managing many more cases in the community and expect that. We've got all sorts of contingency plans for our hospitals. It's going to be a real stretch, and it's going to be a real tough time.
Northland is one of the least vaccinated regions in the country, but rates are improving. 85% of people are single-dosed and 75% have had 2 shots. For Maori, it's 75% with 1 shot and 62% double-dosed. The region is bracing for the arrival of thousands of people when Auckland's border opens on December 15th, but Dr Chamberlain says only vaccinated people are welcome.
I think we've already got enough unvaccinated people in Northland.
He says the low vaccination rates are a significant concern for the region opening up.
We don't have the health services to deal with large numbers of sick visitors as well. So, in those cases, many of those visitors will need to go back to their homes to get their ongoing health care.
Last week, Northland iwi collective Te Kahu o Taunui asked visitors to stay away from the region until vaccination rates improve. It's still not clear how the border with Auckland will be managed after December 15th. Police will have operational discretion of the new rules, which require travellers to be double vaccinated or have received a negative COVID test in the past 72 hours. Ngāti Kuri Trust Board Chair Harry Burkhard says they feel prepared for the arrival of visitors next month.
We've got a lot of confidence in the government making sure those people coming north from Tamaki Makaurau are vaccinated and they're not bringing the virus in. So you need to think about from a virus perspective, not a vaccination perspective, but that's one of many tools.
But he says they will have additional measures in place to keep people safe.
Those campsites we have in the far north that we're responsible to, for anybody to get in those campsites, they have to register, they have to demonstrate they are double vaccinated, and then we've reduced the density of the campsites.
The Department of Conservation has currently closed one of its biggest campgrounds in the north at Matai Bay. Up to 500 people a night camp there during the summer peak, and there are concerns it could be a COVID spreader site. DOC says it's looking at its policies around vaccination and will be updating them as the government releases further details on the traffic light system.
In just 1 week, vaccine passports will become the new norm. When you enter a bar, a restaurant or go and get your hair cut, you'll need to show you're double vaccinated. For the vast majority, people will show this information on their smartphones. But for some elderly people who aren't used to the technology, they're struggling. Kate Gregan has the story.
Look, when I phoned that number, I didn't. Brenda wasn't mentioned, so I don't know that I've got a card coming for her at all.
Arthur and Brenda Murcott thought they had their vaccine passes all sorted.
Well, you've got it all in writing.
Oh, I don't know. This is my hospital thing.
Oh, well, that's not
That's
probably...
yours.
Yeah. No, that's nothing to do with this, I don't think.
No. Oh.
At first, 90-year-old Arthur attempted to download his vaccine pass on his cell phone, but things didn't go according to plan.
I'm completely computer illiterate. And I went over to my neighbour, and he tried to put it through on the phone, and he couldn't do it for me. He could only do himself on the computer. And if I couldn't use the computer, then it just had to be done by phone.
For those who don't have a smartphone or a separate email address, there is the option of calling the Vaccine Pass helpline and requesting a physical certificate.
Well, I simply rang the number on the bottom of the card and got through, did the job, just like that.
Just like that. Almost. It was during our phone call that Arthur realised he hadn't requested a physical copy for his 88-year-old wife. Brenda Murcott has this to say about the whole process.
Very difficult.
But others have told RNZ they can't get through to the 0800 helpline. Rosemary Watson emailed Checkpoint this week to say she's called about 50 times. When she eventually did get through, she was on hold for 45 minutes before being told to call back in 2 weeks as the mailing system wasn't ready. Alexis Sawyers from Age Concern Auckland says it's hard to know how many people are having trouble.
We've had quite a lot of calls from people wondering how to get the passports, but we know and we're fully expecting to get a lot more. And I know that I've spoken personally to a number of people who haven't even thought about the vaccine passport yet. And so I think it's going to become, in the next few weeks, a much more widespread issue.
The Ministry of Health says it received nearly 70,000 calls to the 0800 number yesterday, and it's now increased capacity to cope with demand, adding that getting a certificate via post is now available. Age Concern's Chief Executive, Stephanie Clare, says while the next few weeks may be challenging for some older people, they're up for the task.
So we know that the most disadvantaged in the digital space will be our seniors, but at the same time our seniors will also be the most that rise to the challenge. So we do know that it's going to be difficult.
Stephanie Clare says it's an important reminder to look out for those around you and offer a helping hand where possible.
If you do have a digital device and you don't know how to use it or don't know how to put the pass on, ask a trusted friend or family member to help you do that. And again, over the fence, you can help your neighbour. We've noticed that people drop in just to ask how to do that, to make sure it's all sorted. It is achievable here, and please don't forget to include older people in making sure that technology is working for them.
The Ministry of Health says in the coming days, people will also be able to go to a pharmacy to request their My Vaccine Pass. New Zealanders will be required to use their certificates in select venues from 11:59 p.m. next Thursday.
Do get in touch if you're having any problems with that vaccine pass. Let us know what's going on for you. Text us on 2101 and tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. The next yarn is a perler in tens of thousands of ways. Timaru District Libraries are one step closer to claiming a Guinness World Record. The challenge, creating the largest knitted blanket fort on Earth. They've reached their target of 70,000 Peggy squares. Now they're going for broke. I'm joined by outreach librarian Ingrid Davies-Martin. Kia ora, Ingrid.
Kia ora, how are you this evening?
I'm very well. You've obviously had a lot of people on the tools turning out the Peggy squares. Who's been knitting for you?
Oh, absolutely. Our whole community has got behind us. It's just been fantastic. We've had schools, rest homes, the general public, boys, men, everyone's on board. It's great.
So what specifications did you give them for what they needed to turn out?
So we asked for a 10 centimetre Peggy square. We felt that was the easiest way to go. We gave directions of how many rows and how many stitches to stitch on, but it just depended on how you knit and the tension that you use. So we felt that asking for a 10 centimetre square was the way to go.
So there's still a little bit of creativity in there, Ingrid. What are they all looking like?
Oh, they're amazing, and to see them all piled up is just wonderful. I mean, I'm looking at a pile of them sitting here on the desk now. There's so many colours. People have used different wools. It's just, they look amazing.
So where did this idea come from?
Well, my manager actually dreamed up this idea. We did have some knitting groups going, and we were looking for a project for them, and away we went. We approached Guinness World Records and had a chat to them, and they suggested that this would be a good one for us, and ticked all our boxes, and away we went.
Ingrid, how do you actually build a Peggy square fort of the size and the magnitude that you are going to be going for?
Yes, well, the fort will be 700 metres square, so that's sort of the floor space of 1.5 basketball courts. So we start with the Peggy squares, and then we make them into blankets. So we're now asking our community to come and pick up some Peggy squares and make them into blankets for us. And then all those blankets are going to be attached together, and then we will make a structure and drape the blankets over it.
Okay, so it's sort of like going to be like a sort of marquee or tent situation, and then the Peggy Square extravaganza gets kind of laid over the top.
Absolutely.
Do you have a Peggy Square architect, or what's the deal?
No, but we had a wee play with a couple of blankets this week, and yes, I think a Peggy Square architect will be the way to go.
Do you? I mean, how long is this going to take, Ingrid?
Well, we only started at World Knit in Public Day, which was at the beginning of June this year, and we initially thought the actual sewing up, the knitting of the blankets of the squares, would take us 2 years. So we've been overwhelmed that it's just taken us the 6 months to get this far, to reach the 70,000. So this next part of the project we can see taking a little bit longer, the making the squares into blankets, and then when they're all done, we should be ready to go, hopefully, with a structure to drape them over.
Hey, we're almost out of time, but does this thing have to stay up for a period of time in order for you to get the Grand Supreme Award?
Well, we do have to have someone adjudicated to come and look at it and take the measurements and everything for us to be part of the record. And we do, part of the challenge is to host an event in it. So I think it will be up for a short amount of time.
So a Peggy Square party. Do you need a consent for this thing, by the way, Ingrid?
I'm not sure of the regulations, but we have a team looking into that, so we'll let them work their magic there.
Hey, good to talk to you, Ingrid, and all the best. That's Ingrid Davies-Martin there. I wonder if you do need a resource consent to construct a Peggy Square fort of that magnitude. Can't wait to see it. A lot of you getting in touch about the mandate for police officers in the Defence Force compulsory vaccination here, and pretty much all of you think that that's the way it should be. Peter says, how can an unvaccinated police officer staff a COVID checkpoint? John's got in touch to say any police officer not committed to public safety should not be a police officer. Raywin says, go onto their website and you'll immediately see the headline. It says, keeping our communities safe. They need to walk the talk, says Raywin. Another listener says, yep, it should be a requirement that police are vaccinated. If you can't rely on the cops for your safety, who can you trust? One listener's got in touch to say they should be able to choose whether or not they get vaccinated. And a doctor has texted in to say, I'm a GP, this is ridiculous. We need vaccinated frontline police who will take the viral threat seriously. Others think that all taxpayer-paid employees should be vaccinated via mandates, and Defence Force staff too should definitely be vaccinated, said Jan. They have to be to go overseas, so why not at home during a pandemic? And Ian says, if the police who don't get vaccinated don't trust my profession as a scientist, then on what basis should I trust the police, says Ian. On the National Party, Christopher Luxon as a potential candidate for the leadership. Brian from Ngamotu says Luxon is just another bland grey suit, the last thing this country needs. Another one says, I reckon Judith was over it and staged the whole thing as an exit strategy. Pretty elaborate exit strategy. And another one says no to Bridges. He needs to step away from the leadership now and let National move on. If he gets the leadership, they'll lose next election. His decision to even go for it shows an absolute lack of insight.
RNZ News at 6 o'clock. Kia ora, I'm Marama Tipole. The Police Commissioner says officers support making COVID vaccinations mandatory for staff as they often work with unvaccinated people. Police and Defence Force staff will be required to get at least a first shot of vaccine by January the 17th. Andrew Costa told Checkpoint the nature of police work makes it desirable for staff to be vaccinated.
We deal with a population that is less vaccinated than average, and we also are dealing with people up close and personal, and sometimes in situations where protective equipment can be displaced, and so a vaccination provides a much higher assurance that we can keep our people safe.
More than 86% of police staff are already fully vaccinated, as are more than 98% of Defence Force uniformed personnel. The emergence of a new coronavirus variant in southern Africa is spooking financial markets in the Asia-Pacific region. The local share market's benchmark top 50 index was down by more than 1.6% at one stage today, before closing down 1.3%, the biggest one-day fall since late March. Most leading stocks fell by more than 2%. Markets in Australia and Asia have also dropped, with investors looking for the safety of bonds and the US dollar and the yen. The New Zealand dollar is also weaker against major currencies. The ACT leader won't be drawn on any preference for a victor in National's leadership race. National MPs are currently discussing who should replace Judith Collins, who was ousted yesterday. Simon Bridges has declared his interest in the job, and Christopher Luxon and Mark Mitchell are also considered possible contenders. David Seymour was asked about his views while in Auckland today meeting small business owners affected by crime.
I could work with Chris, who used to be my neighbour. I could work with Mark Mitchell. One of my first jobs was with Mark Mitchell's dad. Look, I've worked with Simon Bridges before. The thing is, I feel like I like them all better than they like each other right now.
The National Party are due to elect a new leader next Tuesday. The UN says the deaths of 27 people who drowned trying to cross from France to England could have been avoided. It's calling on states to give fair access to those needing international protection. Here's the BBC's Imogen Folks.
The UN Refugee Agency has warned repeatedly that closing legal routes to apply for asylum will not deter desperate people fleeing violence. Instead, they will seek any chance to find safety, including people traffickers and flimsy, unseaworthy boats. Not everyone trying to get to the UK is an economic migrant. Before the pandemic, the UK accepted 5,000 of the most vulnerable refugees as part of the UN's resettlement programme. Last year, that number shrank to just a few hundred.
A Department of Conservation ranger who drove a jet boat into a kayaker has been ordered to pay more than $10,000 in reparations. Hamish Cardwell has more.
The man was skippering a Department of Conservation boat on the Whangarei River in November last year when the crash happened. The kayaker saw the jet boat and paddled to the side to give it space. But as the boat got within 20 metres of the paddler, it accelerated, knocking them into the river and causing multiple injuries to their ribs, lungs and shoulder. Maritime NZ says the dock worker failed to maintain a proper lookout and breached the rules. While the man has to pay the kayaker, the Whangarei District Court did not impose an additional fine, as he does not have the financial capacity to pay it.
The New Zealand First Leader says Whangarei has looked a gift horse in the mouth by ditching a long-planned waterfront development today. The council was given $60 million from the Provincial Growth Fund to help build the Oruku Landing Conference and Event Centre, plus Plaza Bridge and Ferry Terminal. But it had to put in between 50 and 70 million itself, which would have meant an average rates rise of between 5.5% and 7%. And today, councillors nixed the project. Winston Peters says it's extremely disappointing.
This is a terribly sad day for Northland. Getting money out of central government is extraordinarily hard to do.
Winston Peters says the long-term economic benefits outweighed the immediate cost to ratepayers. And the Black Caps have picked up a couple of Indian wickets in the first session of day 2 of the first test in Kanpur. Both have fallen to Tim Southee, but Shreyas Iyer is still at the wicket, having scored a century on debut. A short time ago, India were 301 for 6 in their first innings. That's the news.
Country Life this week's with a couple who have started a nursery on their farm. They're using as much recycled material as they can.
We've got this really cool cart that we've been using to shift the plants around. She's had to have a little bit of a birthday already, a couple of new tyres, and she's a bit wobbly, but it's been perfect for us.
You know, some of us farmers have got fatter fingers and probably aren't as good on some of the more delicate jobs, but we can get on the end of a shovel and shove a bit of compost.
Country Life Friday nights at 9 and Saturday mornings after 7 on RNZ National.
Now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Saturday, Northland to Waitomo, including Coromandel Peninsula and Bay of Plenty. Fine breaks and isolated showers, Taranaki to Wellington, including the central high country. Isolated showers from the Kapiti Coast northward, spreading to Wellington tomorrow evening. Gisborne to Wairarapa, also Nelson, mainly fine. A few showers in Wairarapa and Nelson tomorrow evening. Marlborough and Canterbury, mainly fine today. A few spots of rain south of Ashburton and rain developing tomorrow. For Otago, patchy rain in the east becoming widespread tonight, then gradually clearing tomorrow. Bulla and Westland mostly cloudy, a few showers in Westland, spreading to Bulla this evening and turning to rain south of the glaciers. Rain everywhere tomorrow with heavy falls. For Southland and Fiordland, rain with heavy falls possible, clearing tomorrow. And for Rekohu, the Chatham Islands, fine today, cloudy periods with a few showers for tomorrow. It's 6 minutes past 6.
Kia ora rā e ho no mai hoki mai. This is Checkpoint, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. There are fears a new COVID variant emerging from South Africa could be more transmissible and deadlier than Delta. The UK has put 6 African countries on its travel red list, with some flights temporarily banned, while the World Health Organisation will hold a special meeting on it today. The government here says it's not yet made any changes to its border controls, but epidemiologist Michael Baker says New Zealand's well placed to keep variants out. Our political reporter Annika Smith has more.
Just as the country's latest Delta outbreak plateaus, a new variant has emerged on the other side of the world. ESR has confirmed it has not yet made it to New Zealand's shores. Deputy Prime Minister Grant Robertson says it's early days.
The advice we've had at the moment is that it is a good example of why we need to be cautious. There's no need at this point to be alarmed about it from a New Zealand perspective, but it does point out the fact that the global pandemic is still going.
The UK has temporarily suspended flights from South Africa and 5 neighbouring countries. So far, New Zealand's border controls remain unchanged. Director of Public Health, Dr. Carolyn McElnay, is confident it won't slip through the current system.
We are closely watching, and just to add that every case that comes in across the border, we do whole genome sequencing on that. We continue to do that, and that's where, if we saw it, we would pick that up.
Epidemiologist Michael Baker agrees. He says New Zealand's border controls, widely criticised as being too stringent, places it in a unique position to keep COVID-19 variants out.
This is still a system that will be very good at picking up any infected people. We have the ability to keep out this virus, if necessary, any emerging COVID-19 variant.
It says the government released a tranche of official documents, including a letter Sir Brian Roche penned in late September, warning the government was not prepared to reopen to the world. Sir Brian, who's head of an independent expert group, said the latest Delta outbreak exposed urgent issues regarding New Zealand's ability to open safely and warned of waning public tolerance to restrictions. The World Health Organization is due to meet in a few hours. The New Zealand government saying it will take its analysis of the risk of this new variant on board. There is concern the variant has a degree of vaccine resistance. Michael Baker says if this is correct, blunt border controls will mean New Zealand is well placed to keep it out.
I mean, the worst case scenario is that our vaccines don't work very well on this variant, and we'd have to actually wait till people got revaccinated or boosted.
Mr Baker stressed a scenario like this is very unlikely. The government intends to take on any analysis from the World Health Organization after it meets overnight.
DHBs are hoping their best laid plans will be the bedrock for getting through the summer period. Since Delta arrived in the country, DHBs outside of Auckland have been planning for its arrival at their door, getting ready to live with COVID, but not let it overwhelm the health system. Manawatu reporter Jimmy Allingham has more.
For so long, the COVID Delta outbreak was something for other regions to worry about, as far as people in Palmerston North and surrounding districts were concerned. Then a fortnight ago, 2 cases were confirmed in the Tararua district town of Woodville. Cases then appeared in Ashurst, Palmerston North and Pahiatua. COVID has arrived. The Mid-Central District Health Board is confident its COVID resilience plan's surge response will work, as Board Chief Executive Catherine Cook explains.
Initially, it would be fair to say we thought this would come and then it would go, and which is why we're now living with COVID. So we've moved out of that emergency response where you think you will address it, and now we're very much thinking about how do we live with COVID, and that's where the plan has changed.
That involves people with COVID, if possible, staying home. At Palmerston North Hospital, 12 beds, including 4 in intensive care, have ventilators, and there are other ventilators on site for children and for when patients are on the move. Nurses are undergoing COVID-specific training, and work will begin next week on upgrading the hospital's oxygen supply.
We've done quite a lot of work in the hospital. It's an old hospital, and so it's not going to be anything other than an old hospital, but there are things that we have been able to do to future-proof it for COVID.
A ward has been identified to be turned into a place for treating COVID patients not requiring a ventilator. At the heart of Mid-Central's strategy is getting vaccination rates as high as possible. The region sits at 91% for first dose and 82% for second.
We're constantly refining our approach, but we feel as well prepared as we can be, and we'll be learning as we go, but we feel that we're in a good position.
In the Tararua district, testing sites are busy after the positive Pahiatua case. District Mayor Tracy Collis says everyone is prepared as much as possible and bracing for what will happen next. Since the positive cases were announced, business has quietened.
What I've noticed in Woodville, you've still got spare car parks available. In Pahiatua yesterday, very busy at the supermarket in the morning. The minute that the location of interest was announced, that dropped right off.
In Palmerston North, where the first dose vaccination rate is 96%, Deputy Mayor Alicia Rutherford says people are still out and about.
What I've seen is certainly not a decrease in activity in the city centre. Perhaps habits have changed around how often people or how long people are staying out and those kind of things. But I'm still seeing town is full, there's lots happening.
Keeping life as normal as possible will be the goal when COVID is spread throughout the community.
Well, it appears Kate Gregan's story earlier in the program about vaccination certificates, digital or otherwise, have struck a rather painful chord with you. We've had a lot of feedback on this. Chris says, I'm 44 years old and was swearing at my phone trying to download the passport. I'm not even elderly, says Chris. Someone, please set up a neighbourhood help desk that IT challenged people can go to get help with this stuff. There's such demand for all sorts of things, another listener reckons. And this one, I can't save the passport onto my Huawei phone because the Google process required won't work on Huawei devices. Anthony's got in touch to say, I have downloaded a digital something to my mobile. I tap the icon and a grey shape with blank spaces appears. I feel your pain. I really do. And this person says, I went to my local Unichem. They kindly printed my vaccine passport with no fuss in about 5 minutes. You want to clarify to listeners that it's only the vaccinated pharmacies that can do that, though, as other pharmacies that I went to didn't. And this one from a person who says, I'm an old person. No issues whatsoever. The pass arrived on my phone overnight. From the afternoon, I set up the account via my email address. Hurrah. Well done, you. It is 6:15 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. An Auckland dairy owner says he doesn't feel safe leaving his wife in the shop on her own and believes crime is on the rise in the inner city. ACT Party leader David Seymour says it's partly because officers are caught up managing the border around Auckland. Chen Yule reports.
Sumi runs the Stop and Save Superette with her husband in a central suburb of Mount Eden. Early this morning, her shop got burgled for the 4th time since the Delta lockdown, along with the liquor store next door. Sumi says one officer showed up later and they asked a staff member to accompany them to inspect the store.
We really want the community and our local MP to support us, to take this issue to the parliament, and we want them caught.
Sumi says it's a safe neighbourhood, but a recent spate of crime has been ridiculous. She says they have to upgrade their security system and the cost is not only financial.
Yeah, I know insurance covers some of the stuff, but it's just all the our time and all the effort and our well-being.
Kalpesh Patel is the owner of Hilltop Superette in Parnell. His store was ram-raided a month ago. He said the police couldn't attend on the night and only visited the next morning.
Same frustration as them. Police didn't come the next same night. So me and my wife was standing out there until emergency glass people came and blocked off the shop.
Kalpesh Patel also says shoplifting is happening daily and they don't feel safe in the store.
Since the lockdown, I haven't gone out for a walk. I used to go every single day, but these days, leaving my wife alone in the shop only happens if I have to, just like now. Otherwise, I don't.
Another woman says the family's dairy in Mount Eden was robbed this week. She says a group of young boys came in, attacked her uncle and took cigarettes and cash before leaving.
What do we do to start getting some support, to get some awareness and for change to start happening? Because it's a really sad situation what's happening in our society and things are getting worse and we can't be blind to it forever.
Mark North Thomas, Chief Executive of the Newmarket Business Association, says he raised concerns about post-COVID crime waves over a year ago and things have become worse. He says business owners need help from the government right now.
We're seeing bashings, we're seeing muggings, we're seeing robberies, endless robberies, and the police, our local police, are amazing. They do a fantastic job, but they're so stretched. They're being run ragged across the city. And I think what annoys me the most or frustrates me the most, and for our business owners, is that the minister appears to be asleep at the wheel.
ACT Party leader David Seymour says it's a problem of both police numbers and deployment.
We love our local police, there just aren't enough of them and they've been distracted by COVID, which has put a whole lot of people at risk. We're not saying that we don't need police on COVID, of course we do, but we also need to draw attention that COVID is a problem, it's not the only problem.
Police say it has been extremely challenging policing in a pandemic, and they have had to redeploy staff to assist with checkpoints and manage isolation and quarantine facilities. They say they expect a gradual return of staff who are working at the moment on COVID response.
Auckland's months-long COVID-19 lockdown means gay men in Auckland are no longer eligible for subsidised access to a commonly used safe sex drug. Pre-exposure prophylaxis, better known as PrEP, is a pill that reduces the risk of HIV infection by 99% if taken daily. The prescription drug is funded by Pharmac in 3-month supplies, but to be eligible for a subsidised script, the patient must have had unprotected sex with a casual partner within the previous 3 months. Jake McKee reports.
Auckland surpassed 3 months in lockdown last week. That means men who have sex with men or transgender people in Tamaki Makaurau haven't been able to have casual sex for more than 90 days, ruling them ineligible for funded PrEP when their stock runs out. A doctor could still prescribe the drug for the patient at its full cost, which the New Zealand AIDS Foundation estimates would be at least $180 for a 90-day supply. A 27-year-old man, Will called James, who lives in central Auckland, says that cost is out of his reach.
I mean, honestly, financially I probably couldn't afford that. I would try and look at every road possible to not pay that.
James hasn't been sexually active since before the August lockdown and says his supply ran out not long afterwards. He is now technically ineligible for funded PrEP and would have to have unprotected receptive anal sex to regain access, which is considered high risk. However, it's known some patients and GPs lie to get PrEP, something James has done before.
I'll just tell my doctor, yep, I'm at risk. I've had unprotected sex. I've been a bottom, because whether that's true or not, I know that he'll tick the boxes I need to get it.
One Auckland-based GP who spoke to RNZ anonymously says doctors use the Pharmac criteria as more of a guideline, with lying a well-established practice. Their quotes have been revoiced.
From a risk minimisation thing, it's still appropriate for someone to get it even if by the rule they haven't quite met the criteria.
They say the current criteria means everyone has to lie until restrictions allow for casual sex to happen.
It makes it more ridiculous to have a rule like that when it's not being followed, or it requires the person accessing it to lie. It would be horrible to think that people that need it are not accessing it because of that arbitrary rule.
There are other criteria PrEP users must meet, including being tested for HIV, syphilis and a full STI screening when they renew their prescription. The General Manager of the New Zealand AIDS Foundation, Joe Rich, says PrEP can't be a silver bullet for HIV prevention, saying there are other tools such as condoms. But he says Auckland's lockdown emphasises how complex access to PrEP can be.
Life's complicated. You can't always have proven risk. For example, you might have people leaving long-term relationships, being back in the market, so to speak, and wanting to be able to access a preventative tool. They shouldn't have to put themselves at risk.
One of the country's top sexual health researchers at the University of Auckland, Dr. Peter Saxton, says there are parallels between PrEP and the oral contraceptive pill for women. Most notably, they are both a preventative drug taken daily. However, women don't have to be sexually active to access the pill.
Pharmac funds medications and devices to avoid pregnancy, vaccines against HPV. So this really is no different to any of those. Plus, we have this incredibly significant problem, which is a global HIV pandemic.
Dr. Saxton says Pharmac's rules need to change. Joe Rich says the Aid Foundation's been pushing for change for years, specifically that PrEP should be prescribed on prospective risk instead of previous risk. Pharmac says it's assessing recommendations to change the rules, but doctors can apply for a special waiver if they think that Auckland patients meet the spirit of the criteria.
The scrapping of Whangarei waterfront development plans have left some relieved and others resentful. The District Council was gifted $60 million in government funding for the Oruku Landing Conference and Event Centre, but it had to put in between 50 and 70 million, meaning an average rates rise of 5.5 to 7%. Sam Ollie reports from Te Tai Tokerau.
It was pitched as a world-class development, boasting a conference and events centre, public plaza, bridge and ferry terminal. But now the dream is over. 5 elected members voted to keep the project, but 9 did not, including Mayor Cheryl Mai.
We have to be concerned for our people. They have spoken. I cannot support the proceeding of this in any way, shape or form. I'm not going to support an amendment.
80% of the 5,000 submitters opposed the plans, and residents remain divided.
I think it's a shame. I think it would have done Whangarei a lot of good in the long term.
Although they had that government money put in, I still think it would have been too much for the ratepayer, and something which is a little bit more accessible to everyone, not just a certain amount of people.
I had some concerns about the cost blowout and where that was all going to go, so I think caution was the best way to go.
I am opposed to it completely.
The council decided to ditch it this morning, so it's not going to happen.
Great. Congratulate them on their decision, will you?
But it was upsetting for those who advocated for the project, like North Chamber Chief Executive Steve Smith.
I would have thought that we would have graciously accepted that to get a momentum for the region.
Whangarei MP Dr Emily Henderson is also disappointed by the council's call. The government backing came from the Provincial Growth Fund, a New Zealand First brainchild. Now the fund will put the money somewhere else, not necessarily in Te Tai Tokiro, and Winston Peters says Whangarei has looked a gift horse in the mouth.
This is a terribly sad day for Northland. Getting money out of central government is extraordinarily hard to do.
Private developers said they would add a 4-star hotel and apartments if the council went ahead with Oruku Landing. Architect Jade Kake was one of the consultants helping incorporate tikanga Maori to the plans. She hoped it would go ahead, but says COVID was a game changer.
I can understand why people are risk averse and not seeking to embark on a project of this nature. And so if this had happened a bit earlier or a bit later, we might have had a different outcome.
Jade Kake is one of those hoping the Oruku Landing proposal will somehow have another life.
The COVID situation in Europe is expected to worsen over Christmas. Portugal has announced a series of new measures, including bringing back mandatory face coverings in enclosed places. In Germany, Chancellor Angela Merkel is warning every day counts in the battle to keep COVID infections down. Meanwhile, the French government has already tightened measures such as mask wearing and COVID passports in the hope further measures can be avoided. The BBC's Naomi Grimley has this report.
In France, the number of COVID infections is doubling every 11 days, but the government is reluctant to copy Austria's new lockdown. Instead, the French authorities have announced that booster shots will be extended to all adults, not just the most vulnerable. These boosters will become necessary for a valid health passport, which is required to enter restaurants, cafes, cinemas and museums. The Health Minister, Olivier Véran, said there would be new rules too on masks.
Starting tomorrow, a decree will require mask wearing in all interior areas covered by the health pass. So even while you carry a health pass in a public place, you must wear a mask.
The mood music across Europe is not reassuring. The Dutch government says it's considering heavy measures, while Belgium says its recent surge has exceeded the most pessimistic curves drawn up by experts. Meanwhile, the outgoing German Chancellor Angela Merkel is warning her country it may need more restrictions because hospitals are still in danger of being overwhelmed. The European Medicines Agency has today approved vaccines for 5 to 11-year-olds. Although virus transmission is so bad in Austria, they'd already begun vaccinating younger children.
He's behind you. If you visit a theatre in the UK at the moment, you'll hear audiences shouting that line. It's panto, or pantomime season, which when interactive plays featuring exaggerated characters from traditional fairy tales like Cinderella or Aladdin, and lots of slapstick singing and dancing hits theatres across the country. And it turns out Queen Elizabeth and her sister were big fans of panto in their teens, starring in quite a few of them. Now some of the elaborate costumes they wore are going on display for the first time. The BBC's Daniela Ralph has the story.
Windsor Castle is Christmas ready. Its trees are decorated, its grand staterooms dressed. And this year, the castle is taking visitors back 80 years, to the days when a pair of teenage girls who lived here tried to lift spirits during the Christmases of the Second World War. Princess Elizabeth, as she was then, and her sister Princess Margaret created an annual royal pantomime. For the first time, some of their costumes have come out of the archive and are on display. The two princesses were always the star performers. The shows were staged in this room, the Waterloo Chamber. The audience was castle staff, the local school, troops and the King and Queen. Money from tickets sold was used to make blankets for soldiers on the front line. I know, we're in the grand surroundings of Windsor Castle, but here there is something quite ordinary about putting on a show for your family and your friends.
Ordinary up to a point. I mean, they were supported by, sound technicians that came specially from the BBC, special set designers, but that was very much blended with that kind of homemade element too. So whilst the performances, looked very grand and very beautiful, there was very much a kind of homegrown spirit to it all.
The pantos also showed the strong sibling bond. On stage, in costume, Elizabeth and Margaret were a formidable partnership. And privately, these royal sisters were a vital support for one another. They were often away from their parents, having moved out of London during the war. And the evacuee experience is part of this Christmas display. The paintings of fairy tale characters that provided a backdrop to the pantos were designed by an art student evacuated to Windsor. His story will be brought to life for younger visitors to the castle. As the Queen heads into her 70th year on the throne, the panto display is a reminder of Christmases here at the castle during a unique time in her life, before she had taken on the responsibilities of monarch. It is a snapshot of a royal childhood, of how Christmas at the castle tried to bring some festive cheer to the dark days of war.
Some more of your thoughts before we head off. A police officer's got in touch to say they're fully vaccinated. We cannot afford to lose any staff from our district. We're already 27 staff short. I do support individual choice. That choice, however, should not compromise the potential well-being of others. If you want the job, get a jab. It's that simple. On the Peggy Squares, for the Peggy Square fort, this person says, brilliant. Peggy Square's such a relief after this week. Real people doing real things for the community. Have a fab weekend. We'll see you Monday.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. The Police Commissioner has told Checkpoint about 900 of its 11,000 staff remain unvaccinated against COVID-19. A leading epidemiologist says New Zealand's border controls, widely criticised as being too stringent, places it in a unique position to keep COVID-19 variants out. The ACT leader says he will work happily with whomever National elects to replace Judith Collins. A group of small business owners in Auckland are appealing for help to stop what they say is an increase in crime exacerbated by the COVID-19 outbreak. Those are the headlines. Our next news and weather is at 7.
Take the pulse of the day's news every weeknight at 10.
The closest thing I can relate it to is having like a pet stolen. Someone came and grabbed your dog from your backyard. This couple has spent, 30 years on some of these trees.
Lately with me, Karen Hay, is your late night eye on the latest headlines and the people who are making them.
The problem with